Well, thank you for inviting me to share your Yom Hashoah commemoration with you. It's very special for me because on April the 11th, 10 days ago today in 1945, my father was liberated from Buchenwald. Had he not survived, I'm sure I would be an old Polish nun today. And here I've got, I went to Buchenwald, I don't know if you can see it, I went to Buchenwald and they gave me his form of when he entered and when he left. So I thought, I'd just share a few things like that as we go along. Anyhow, I was born Manisteinman in Opatów, Poland, and us Jews called it Apt. And I'm one of only two small children that survived the war from there. We were a well-to-do modern Orthodox family, and my father had 3 brothers and he had 4 sisters. And he even served in the Polish army in 1933. And Jews had had a presence in Apt since the early 1600s. Now, my mother was from Lublin, which was a beautiful, very cultured city. And she had 2 sisters and an older brother, but she moved to Apt when she married my father in 1940. And 9 months later, I was born. And I'm sure that was the last thing that my parents wanted, was to bring a life into the world then. Now, I was the first grandchild to both sets of grandparents. Here's a picture of my mother and father in Lublin just before they got married. I hope you can see it.
Yeah.
Anyways, the only language that was ever spoken in our home prior to my birth was Yiddish. But from the moment I was born, no Yiddish was ever spoken again, only Polish, because my family realized that eventually, in order to save my life, they'd have to hide me as a Christian. And if I couldn't speak Yiddish, and I wouldn't be able to give myself away. Now, the very first thing the Germans did when they entered Apt was burn down our market square, along with all the homes that surrounded it, and they were owned by Jews. We were also forced to wear, white armbands with blue stars of David, and that was to identify us as Jews at all times. Of course, as you know, all of our civil liberties were taken away, and men and boys were forced into slave labor. And I was actually 4 months old when the ghetto was first set up. And initially, the ghetto had about 5,200 people, but it grew to way over 7,200 because the Germans brought in people from as far away as Vienna into our ghetto, as well as people that were in large areas, and they thought they might be safer in smaller areas. So people were just running around like rats trying to find a safer place. So we wound up with quite a few more Jews. So if you can put yourself into this and imagine all these people occupying only 2 city blocks of houses and just a few alleyways. Now, because of the overcrowding and the unspeakable sanitary conditions, there was an outbreak of typhus in the ghetto. Let's see, I want to show you. Here is the only picture that I have prior to me being given away. It's my father and myself, and yeah, it was just a few weeks before I was hidden. Okay, let's see. So every single night you could hear shooting coming from the Jewish cemetery. The Germans would just pick up old people that disobeyed curfews, what have you. They take them to the Jewish cemetery at night, and they murder them. Now, in January of 1942, I'm sure you all know that was when the Germans implemented their final solution, and that was to murder all of the Jews of Europe. And they constructed their very first physical killing center. It was called Belzec. That was in Poland, of course. And in mid-March of 1942, they murdered a good part of Lublin's Jews there. And like I told you before, my mother was born in Lublin, and all of her family, her grandmother, her little brother, her two sisters, aunts, uncles, everybody was murdered in Belzec that March. This is a picture of my mother's knoyim, and my mother's in the center and surrounded by all her family, and everybody was murdered. And I traced my mother's father and his father and so forth, the grandfathers, all the way back to 1750 when they first took a surname. It was Pfeffer, and no one from my mother's family survived. Anyhow, so that was my mother's side. But my grandfather, my father, they were flour and wheat merchants in Abt, and they had very good relations with some of the Polish landowners. So when rumors started that the end was near, they asked this Polish landowner by the name of Repolewska if he would take me until it was safe to return me. And he agreed. So the next morning, my parents took me to this prearranged area and snuck me out of the ghetto. And the Repolewska's carriage driver was waiting. And my father took me up to the carriage, and my mother stood back crying. And that was the last time I ever saw my mother. Anyways, a few weeks later, actually more like a couple of weeks after I was given away, my father and his brother and sister-in-law wound up in a slave labor camp in Starkovitz, and my mother stayed back in Abt with her in-laws. And then just like 2 weeks later, like October the 20th of 1942 was a daybreak, Germans and Ukrainians surrounded our ghetto, and they forced all the Jews into a square. And then they made their selection, and those that resisted or were slow, they just murdered right there and then. And the rest of the people were forced to walk 11 miles to where the train station was. And so my family was taken by cattle car to Treblinka. And Treblinka's work was strictly death. It was a processing plant for Jewish humans. And my family went directly to the gas chambers. They were packed in like sardines, and they were murdered, and then they were cremated. So my mother was murdered at the age of 25 years of age, along with most of my father's family. And I was supposed to be with them, of course, but I cheated death through the unselfishness and the wonderful deed that my parents did to give me away. So I went into hiding with this couple. Like I said, it was a couple of weeks before my mother was murdered. And the Repolewskas, and they gave me a Polish name, and I became Marysia Repolewska. They told their neighbors that I was a niece visiting them. And back then there was bounty on Jewish heads. So if you reported a Jew, then you got a reward. So when I didn't leave after a few weeks, the neighbors got suspicious, and I guess one of them must have reported me to the Gestapo. So there was a knock on our door, and the Gestapo came to interrogate me. And they were very, very well trained in Yiddish. And they tried to trip me up by speaking Yiddish to me. They'd be able to tell by an expression in my eyes or my facial expression if I could understand them. But I was totally blank. I only understood Polish. And for me, thank God, that saved my life. So they left to check me out further. Well, after that, the Repolewskas got so scared because the punishment for harboring a Jew would have been death for them, possibly. And so they told their carriage driver just to put me in the carriage right there and then and take me to far away, just away from them. So he drove through several towns, and eventually he came to the town of Klimentov, and he saw a convent in the distance. So he put me in a big ditch by the side of the road, And then he drove away, and I was epileptic. I was screaming and crying. But what he did was he pulled up to the door of the convent, and when a nun answered the door, he told him that he thought that he heard crying coming from this ditch and that they should check it out. So the nuns took me in, thinking that I was a poor little Christian waif. Now, this is the convent, me. Don't see if you can see it that well. And this is me right here, the tiny little thing here. I made it bigger here, but you could see I was just so young and scared. Anyways, my memories there, of course, are very vague, but I still remember darkness and cold. And I was always so hungry. I was always starving. And every single morning we'd go across to the church, and we'd do little chores there, and we'd pray. And the church also, I remember, as being very, very dark and scary. And from that time on, I pretty well looked after myself because I didn't trust anything. And I became sort of like a chameleon, trying to blend into with everything. I tried not to make too much noise, tried not to cry, and always tried to be pleasing. And but you know, I didn't have anybody to share my fears with, and it was very, very tough. But after a time, I became acclimated, and I was baptized, and then I became a fervent Catholic. Anyways, I spent a few years there, and then when I was about 4.5, all of a sudden the Germans bombed our convent. I have no reason why. I don't understand why. And our barrack was, it took a direct hit. It was very late at night. The nuns rushed in, and they made us all run out to this large courtyard with a big statue of the Virgin Mary. And and they made us kneel down and pray to the Virgin to save us. So here's all these noises around us, and fire, and we're kneeling, praying to the Virgin. Then all of a sudden, I don't know why, but I just got up and I started running, and I couldn't stop running. And to this day, I remember darkness, I remember fire, and tripping over bodies. And like I say, I just kept running until I got so tired that I just fell asleep by the side of the road. Anyways, to go along faster, eventually I was put into another convent because this one wasn't taking children anymore. Now, meanwhile, my father was sent on a death march to Auschwitz from Starkovitz. And there he was a laborer in the Bunamanowitz part of Auschwitz. Interestingly enough, who was with him was Elie Wiesel and also Primo Levi. I've never shown this before, but it's rather interesting. This is my father's ID card from Auschwitz. They were just so, they just kept track of everything on there. They even have what his mother and father's name is, and his wife, what his wife's name is, and even that he had one child, me, a kinder. So I just thought you might find this interesting. I got this from the Bad Arlson files. Excuse me. Anyways, as the Russians were approaching to liberate the camp, my father was sent on a death march into Buchenwald, and that was in Germany. And he arrived in Buchenwald on the 26th of January, and Auschwitz was liberated one day earlier. No, excuse me, one day later. You know, what lousy luck for my father. But as I said before, Auschwitz was liberated April the 11th of 1945, and then my father went back to Poland, you know, to try to find family. But of course, everybody was dead. And then he went, he started trying to track me down. He found me in this town of Lanier, and knocked on the door, and the nuns opened, and they asked for me. He said I wasn't there. they wouldn't give me back. And they said they had absolutely no Jewish children, had never had any Jewish children. Well, he just kept persisting. So they allowed him to come in, and they told him that if he could pick me out, he could have me. So they took all the little girls and they lined us all up with our backs to the wall, and he could only look at us through from the back. And now you have to remember, the last time my father had seen me, I was like less than 2. I was near 3/4. At this time, you know, I'm almost 5 years old. But luckily, he recognized me by a mole that I was born with on the inside of my left leg. So then they told him that they didn't really want to give me up. They told him that he couldn't have me unless he could give them 5,000 zlotys, and that was, of course, for my keep. And he knew he had nothing. He was penniless. He was homeless, and he looked like a cadaver. And he thought they saw the last of him. But anyways, he went back to up. Excuse me. And by this time, several Jewish agencies had opened up to help the survivors with the refugee crisis. So my father begged for 5,000 zlotys to get me out of the convent, and he somehow got his 5,000 zlotys. And I don't know who it was from, but I believe it was the joint. And he went back to get me. I had a huge stomach from malnutrition. Lice were dancing in my hair. I took one look at this Jew, and I started screaming. I didn't want to go to him because I was taught that, you know, the Jews killed Christ. And here this Christ killer is trying to take me with him. So, and I was actually, I was an avid Christian, and for some reason, I don't know why, I was just a ferocious Jew hater. So I had to go with my father, and he took me to Lodz, and he had found 2 of his younger sisters alive that had worked in slave labor camps. And every single night I would go into a corner of the living room, and I would cross myself and I would pray to Jesus. Now, to say the least, my family was so unhappy with me because here, all of the loved ones were murdered, all of our homes were destroyed, and they were lucky that they were slaves, so they survived. But all this just because they were Jewish, and here their flesh and blood is a fervent anti-Semite. Well, we lived in Poland for a short while, but then we realized that we weren't safe and we had to get out because anti-Semitism was rampant after the war, and in Poland. And there were pogroms where Polish vigilante groups were beating up and sometimes even killing Jews that were coming back from camps, from hiding, from forests. And so in the middle of the night again, we fled, and we had to cross, after Poland, we had to cross the Russian border to get into southern Germany. And you see, Poland had been liberated by the Russians, so it was in the Russian zone. And of course, southern Germany was liberated by the Allies, by the Americans, so that was the American zone. But anyhow, so we did eventually make it across to a place called Virta-na-Dona, which is about 15 kilometers from Regensburg, and we reunited there with my aunt and my uncle. Now, what the Americans had done was they had thrown out about 10 houses worth of Germans, high-ranking Germans, out of their homes, and they set up a DP camp for the Jewish homeless. And let's see. So this is Virta-na-Dona, and okay. Let's see, right here is me. And I'm always leading the parade. They treated me like I was their little mascot. And everybody behind me is a survivor. And we're all celebrating in Germany the creation of the state of Israel. So you can see all the way down. we're just all survivors. Anyhow, a lot of us lived in each house, and my father and I shared a room, and he was sort of shell-shocked, and he was lost in his own misery. He never got out of the Holocaust. And I just sort of wandered among the refugees. And for a time, I was the only child there until after a while, then people started having babies, and that was wonderful. But then everybody, we're all trying to get out of Europe, and we wanted to go, of course, to the United States, but too hard to get there because their visas were taken up just like that. But after 3 years in Germany, we did finally manage to get a visa for Canada. So I was closer to 9 years old when we got to Toronto. I was put into kindergarten. I was completely illiterate. I didn't know one word of English, and I had not gone to school one day. I had not had any lessons of any sort ever. But then again, I did speak 3 languages, and I also had gone through 3 name changes by this time. And but I was, like a little animal. I was constantly hungry, even though there was there was plenty of food to eat, but I just never got over the hunger. And then my father wasn't able to look after me because he had to go out, make a living, and work. So I lived in a number of foster homes until eventually my aunt and uncle, my father's brother, took me in. So just before I end, because I'll be ending very shortly, I just want to make a few comments. And that's to tell you that, we had really a rich, beautiful life in Poland, and it was taken away just like that in a snap. So I want future generations, as well as everybody here, to understand that by being a bystander, you are almost as guilty as the perpetrator, and that the Germans could never, ever have pulled off the annihilation of 6 million souls if there had been resistance from the general public. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we all have to be very vigilant. We have to teach ourselves, as well as our children, to recognize the signs of evil, hatred, and discrimination. And we have to speak up when we see that. And we have to do everything we can to stop it, especially if we have to go out of our own comfort level. And also, just don't want you to forget that Hitler became Chancellor of Germany through a democratic political process. So we can't be complacent and read or watch only our favorite news programs, and we have to really constantly read from all sides, both from left and from the right, and then we have to make up our own minds and not wear blinkers and certainly not listen to other people's propaganda. We must be proactive and educate ourselves constantly. And of course, I don't have to tell you this, but vote. And then above all else, and here I feel guilty preaching when Rabbi Alusha's just wonderful, should be telling you this, not me. But above all else, I just feel so strong about that. We have to support Israel. We have to fight against the BDS movement. We have to educate our fellow Jews about boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. It's terrible because really hatred of Israel is Jew hatred. It is nothing else. And if there had been a home for the Jewish people during the Shoah, maybe I would have known my mother, and I know a lot more would have survived. Okay, now I'm just going to give you just a perspective for those of us that are feeling a bit stir crazy. I want you to remember that Anne Frank and 7 other people hid in a 450 square foot attic for 761 days, which is more than 2 years, quietly trying to remain undiscovered in order to stay alive. Now, how lucky are we? That's where I end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marion. Really, thank you for these heartfelt words, for for your shining message, and more than anything, for you.
Thank you.
And really, I hope that your words really penetrate, that they inspire in us also that same resilience that you demonstrate, and that same the love for everything good under the sun, and for voicing our own voices of goodness, our own voices of Judaism, our own voices of divinity, so that evil is obliterated from this world and that darkness is expelled. I do want to share with everyone once again here the direct Amazon link to your book. Inspiring, I think, is not a good enough word to encapsulate the emotions that one has while reading your story and your book. So please feel free, everyone, to visit Amazon and visit again Marion's website that was posted just earlier, and dig into the story so that we can also carry the message on forward to all generations to come. I do want to conclude on this Yom Hashoah, not just with words of gratitude, but with what you reminded me, Marion, hopefully a message that everyone takes to heart. You reminded me of a line from the first speech ever given by Chaim Weizmann, who was the first president of the state of Israel. And in his first speech in 1948, he turned to the Jewish world and he said to them that now that Hitler has murdered a third of our nation, it's up to each and every Jew to be a third more Jewish to make up for that. You've done your part, Marion. You're not just a third, not even a half, but you're giving us that 100%. I hope we can learn from you to also be a third more Jewish in our own way and make up for all of the millions murdered. And please, God, demonstrate through that to the world that the nation of Israel is well and alive thanks to people like you. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please stay in touch with all of our programs on cbtvirtualworld.com and continue to stay connected and give each other a spiritual hug. Thank you, Marion. I see your daughter is here also, Cindy. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for also, really, you, David, the whole family. You're just such a special
Cindy is my hero.
That's it.
She's the best thing I ever did in my whole life.
That's so beautiful. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
God bless you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cindy,
Thank you. God bless you.
thank you. Cindy, why don't you stay on with Doris?
Hi, guys.
Hi, Doris.
Oh
Just
my God,
unmute
it's Doris.
Doris, unmute yourself. We can talk.
Hi, can you hear me? I can
Hi,
hear
guys. Oh my God, Cindy, Doris. We all know each other. Hi, Marion. So nice to see you.
So nice to see you.
I know. See, we were going to talk now. Well, there's other people, but anyway, okay. Hi, Doris. Doris, Cindy, and I and Marion know each other from the survivors group. So I had to rub it in, you know. Marion, you were wonderful. You were wonderful.
Oh,
Marion,
thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
When did you give up your your love of Christ? I mean, like, how long did it take?
Doris almost fell out of the car. You know what? It must have taken them about 3 years to indoctrinate me. So I think probably, I would think by the time we left Germany, or maybe as soon as we came to Canada, maybe 4 years.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm a total Jew. You know, I've raised all my children Jewish.
Oh, no, I wasn't insinuating that. I was just wondering how long it took for you to make the transition.
Yeah, at least 3-4 years.
Hi, Marion. Can you hear me? It's Doris.
How are you? You look
Yeah, I can hear you.
beautiful.
Hi, Doris. You guys
Good.
know Doris? She's from Chicago, but she comes to CBT. She's stubborn.
Marion, you are so inspiring. I am so proud to know you. Your words were just beautiful. They went right to my heart.
Thank you.
And I don't know how many were on, but I know that everyone that was listening, your words are unforgettable.
You know, on the screen here, I just see 9. So were we 9 people?
No, there were a lot more. There were, I think, 2 grids worth of people that were.
I know, I checked, there were like 50 people at one point.
Oh yeah, I'm so glad I didn't see them all because I thought I was going to talk to you guys.
Now there's 13, but when I checked before, there were 50 at one point. Everybody loves you, right? No one loves you.
It's good to see your Punim, Doris. Good to see your Punim.
Cindy?
By the way, I mean, I know some of you are in, but we have a mutual friend, good friend of ours. His name is Sam Harris, and Diddy, and he just made a movie about his life, and he was 8 years old when the war was over.
I know Sam very well. I met Sam on a bus in Montreal many years ago.
I'm sorry, what?
No, I said I met Sam on a bus in Montreal many years ago. Didi was with him at the time.
Yeah, but we did stuff together in Chicago. But anyway, so he just made a movie about his life. And it's called Sammy. It was on the Zoom yesterday. So just so you all know. So.
Oh, how can we see it?
I'm sorry, what?
How do we get to see it?
I'm not sure. But if we can get in touch and see. So.
Yeah, I'd love to see. I'd love to see what Sam and Didi and his movie. Thank you. Thank you very much.